The wedding invitation sat on Sarah's desk for 3 weeks before she finally sealed it. Michelle found her staring at the Chen family's address, written in careful calligraphy. "Whatever happens," Michelle said, wrapping her arms around Sarah's shoulders, "we're already a family." The response came via Amy, who'd been sober for 18 months and had discovered a talent for artisanal baking during recovery. "Mom cried for 2 hours after opening it," she texted. "Dad had to leave the room. But they're coming. They want to come." The industrial loft venue reflected Sarah's journey: exposed brick walls, softened by cascading fairy lights, steel beams draped with wild jasmine vines. Carmen, now retired, but still mentoring at New Hope, arranged Thetet Community's wedding gift, a fully funded scholarship program for homeless LGBT+ youth interested in coding. Sarah was adjusting her bow tie in the getting ready room when she heard the familiar click of her mother's heels. She turned to find both her parents in the doorway, aged beyond their years. "Your father has something to say," her mother whispered, gentle now, without the haze of prescription drugs. Dr. Chen stepped forward, his once commanding presence diminished by humility. "When you left, when we forced you to leave, I thought I was protecting our family's honor. Instead, I destroyed it. My gambling, your mother's pills, Amy's struggles. We were falling apart long before you came out. We just couldn't admit it." Sarah met his eyes in the mirror. "And now?" "Now," he said, pulling a creased newspaper from his pocket, "I carry this everywhere. It was the Forbes article about her coding bootcamp. My colleagues' children, they come to me privately, telling me about their own children coming out. I give them your story, not as a shame anymore, but as hope." The ceremony blended traditions. Sarah and Michelle exchanged rings under a chopper, honoring Michelle's Jewish heritage, while traditional Chinese elements honored Sarah's roots. Amy's wedding cake was a masterpiece of healing. Each tier represented a chapter of Sarah's life, from homelessness to hope, decorated with edible coding symbols and rainbow flowers. During the reception, Sarah watched her worlds merge. Carmen chatted with her mother about Sarah's early coding days, her father deep in conversation with Michelle's parents about their shared love of gardening. Amy, serving cake with bright eyes and genuine smile, finally free from the burden of perfection. "May I have this dance?" her father asked as the band played a slow song. On the dance floor, he whispered, "I have no right to ask forgiveness." "Maybe not," Sarah agreed, thinking of cold nights and lonely years. But love isn't about rights or deserving. Sometimes it's about choosing to build something new from the broken pieces. As Michelle joined them, followed by Amy and their mother, Sarah realized that family, like code, could be debugged, rewritten, and made stronger. The bugs in their original programming had nearly destroyed them. But here they were, running a new version, imperfect but functional, patched with forgiveness, and recompiled with love. The New Hope shelter smelled of industrial cleaner and microwaved soup. But to Sarah, it was a lifeline. After her car was towed, with most of her belongings still inside, she'd spent 3 nights sleeping in a 24-hour laundromat before a kind stranger directed her here. The shelter's strict 7 p.m. check-in policy meant giving up her evening shift at the diner, but it also meant a real bed and relative safety. Carmen Rodriguez, with her silver streaked hair and coffee-stained MIT sweatshirt, didn't look like anyone's savior. She ran the shelter's computer literacy program, teaching basic email and resume skills to residents. But it was her offhand comment about debugging that caught Sarah's attention. "You code?" Sarah had asked, helping Carmen set up the ancient desktop computers one evening. 30 years at IBM, Carmen replied, eyeing Sarah with new interest. "You know anything about programming?" Sarah shook her head. "But I want to learn. I used to be good at learning." That night, instead of lying awake listening to her roommate snoring, Sarah opened the introductory Python tutorial Carmen had bookmarked for her. By morning, she had completed every exercise. What followed was a grueling routine that tested every ounce of her determination. She worked morning shifts cleaning office buildings, including a tech startup called Innovate Now. Her afternoons were spent at the public library, Working through coding bootcamp materials Carmen helped her access for free. In the evenings, she practiced coding on her phone, the only possession she'd managed to keep from her old life. The turning point came 3 months later. Sarah was mopping the floor outside Innovatnow's main conference room when she overheard panic inside. Their website had crashed during a crucial investor presentation. Through the glass, she could see the CEO, Marcus Dang, running his hands through his hair in frustration as the tech team scrambled. Sarah's heart pounded as she pulled out her phone, where she'd been practicing debugging exercises. The company's website error looked familiar. She'd fixed something similar in one of Carmen's tutorials. Before she could second-guess herself, she knocked on the conference room door. "I think I can help," she said, her voice steadier than her hands. "It's probably a simple cache invalidation issue." The room fell silent. Marcus looked at her mop, then at her face. "You're the cleaning staff." "I'm also a programmer," Sarah replied, surprising herself with her confidence. "Or at least, I'm learning to be." 20 minutes later, the website was back up. 2 hours later, she had a job offer as a junior developer with a salary that made her eyes water. 1 week later, she moved into her first apartment, a tiny studio, but with a real bed and a lock on the door. When she called Carmen to share the news, her mentor wasn't surprised. "You know why you succeeded where others might have failed?" Carmen asked. "Because you were already a survivor before you got here. Now you're just learning new ways to thrive." Sarah met Michelle at a tech conference in Seattle, where both were speaking on different panels. Michelle's presentation on inclusive design thinking caught Sarah's attention, but it was their shared laughter over terrible conference coffee that sparked something deeper. Their first date stretched from dinner to midnight, trading stories of their journeys in tech and life. When Michelle mentioned her volunteer work at an LGBTQ+ youth center, Sarah felt her walls beginning to crumble. Their relationship bloomed slowly, deliberately. Michelle understood Sarah's hesitation about commitment, the way she flinched at family photos, how she changed the subject when parents were mentioned. On their 6-month anniversary, they adopted Charlie, a 3-legged pit bull mix who'd been overlooked at the shelter. "Sometimes," Michelle had said, scratching behind Charlie's ears, "the ones who've been hurt the most have the most love to give." Sarah's team at Innovatnow had grown to 15 developers. Her office wall displayed her recent achievement: Forbes 30 under 30 in technology. The article mentioned her innovative coding bootcamp for homeless youth, inspired by Carmen's lessons at New Hope Shelter. She carefully avoided mentioning her family background to the interviewer, maintaining the protective wall she'd built around her past. Then came Amy's voicemail. "Sarah, I don't know if you'll listen to this. I'm getting divorced. James, he wasn't who everyone thought he was. Who I pretended he was. Mom's addicted to Valium. Dad's gambling away his surgical practice. And I miss my sister. The real one, not the perfect daughter I tried to be when you left. Please call me back, please." Sarah played the message 7 times, each replay revealing new cracks in Amy's voice. Michelle found her sitting in their kitchen at 3 a.m., Charlie's head in her lap. "She sounds lost," Michelle observed quietly, sliding a cup of chamomile tea across the counter. "I was lost once too," Sarah replied, remembering cold nights in her car. The cafe they chose for their reunion was neutral territory, a small place in a neighboring city. Amy arrived first, her designer clothes replaced by worn jeans and an oversized sweater. The sisters stared at each other, 3 years of silence stretching between them. "Your hair is different," Amy said finally. "So is yours," Sarah responded, noting the dark roots showing through Amy's previously perfect blonde. They ordered coffee. Amy's hands shook as she added sugar. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you. I'm sorry I played the role they wanted. I'm sorry I was too scared to be real." "What are you scared of now?" Sarah asked. "Everything." Amy's laugh was bitter. "My perfect marriage was a lie. James controlled every aspect of my life. The eating disorder started right after you left. Mom and Dad's perfect daughter had to stay thin, stay quiet, stay perfect. I can't do it anymore, Sarah. I can't be perfect." Sarah reached across the table, taking her sister's trembling hand. Then maybe it's time for both of us to just be real. Sarah's fingers trembled as she pulled her worn fleece tighter around her shoulders. The October wind whipped through the car's broken rear window, a casualty of last week's attempted break-in, while she slept in a Walmart parking lot. Her phone, with its cracked screen and dying battery, displayed a photo from just 4 months ago, her family's last vacation to Lake Tahoe, where they'd posed, smiling, as if nothing could ever shatter their perfectly curated life. The catering van's headlights swept across her face as it backed into the driveway, and Sarah instinctively ducked down. Through the gap between her dashboard and steering wheel, she watched the bustling preparations continue. Her mother's voice carried across the manicured lawn, directing servers with the same precise tone she'd once used to coordinate Sarah's medical school applications. The champagne fountain goes by the bay window. Yes, right there where everyone can see it. Amy's fiance's family owns the largest real estate firm in Boston. Everything must be perfect. Perfect. The word echoed in Sarah's mind, taking her back to that fatal morning. She'd been studying for her MCAT, notes spread across her bed, when her mother burst in without knocking. The look on her face told Sarah everything before a word was spoken. In her mother's trembling hands were the letters Julie had written her, discovered in a shoebox beneath Sarah's bed during routine cleaning. "How could you do this to us?" her mother had whispered, each word dripping with horror. "To your future. To your father's reputation at the hospital." What followed was a blur of shouts, tears, and ultimately silence. Her father, the respected Dr. Chen, chief of surgery, hadn't even looked at her as he pointed to the door. "Until you decide to be normal, you are no longer our daughter." Now, watching Amy twirl in her designer dress through the window, Sarah remembered how her sister had stood frozen at the top of the stairs during the confrontation, saying nothing. The same sister who'd known about Julie for months, but had promised to keep Sarah's secret. The same sister who now played the role of the perfect daughter, engaged to the perfect man, living the perfect life Sarah was supposed to have. A tap on her car window made her jump. An elderly woman walking her dog peered in with concern. "Are you all right, dear? You've been sitting here for quite a while." Sarah managed a weak smile and nodded, starting her car. The engine protested but finally turned over. As she pulled away from her childhood home, the sound of laughter and clinking glasses faded behind her. She had exactly $43.27 to her name, a quarter tank of gas, and nowhere to go. But for the first time since being thrown out, she didn't look back. Sometimes, she realized, being cast out of paradise was the first step toward finding your own version of heaven.